Hi and welcome. Thank you so much for the love on the previous vid that I did. It's been a good motivation to do this one for today. So yeah, here's a thumbnail I had. Just quickly sketched this out. Wanted to do a small sci-fi bedroom. Most of the elements are in there. So I'm going to work from there to try and make a semi-decent drawing. So here we go. While you're here, keep on supporting me. It helps a lot. So give a click on that like and that subscribe button. Give us a follow. It really helps. Thank you very much. So here's a little sketchbook tour while we do this. Find a page. And the process is going to be very similar to what we did before. So I know there's a couple of elements I want to put in right away because they're going to help showing the scale of the room. So I'm putting the bed here on the left side early in the process. I think I'm going to change its size a couple of times over the duration of the video. Because basically this is the item that's gonna give a sense of size, of scale to the room. Everybody knows what a bed is, everybody knows how big it is. So from that you can derive pretty much everything else. I'm also using a little trick to make the scene more interesting. On the left side of my drawing here, I've put a vertical line and nothing on its left side. That's because I want to do a tiny bit of a door. Just enough to put something in the foreground, and that makes the image a lot more dynamic, and I think it's just much nicer for the viewer. It's always nice to close the borders of your images as much as you can, and a background and a foreground go a long way, even if they're super simple in a drawing. So here in the back I'll have a little desk and a chair that I'm going to do now. Now the chair I did in the thumbnail I thought was a bit boring. I thought I'd try something funnier. And I also wanted it to be not 90 degrees to the wall or the desk, but something a little in between. I think it's a good practice to vary a bit the perspective of objects in the drawing. Now here's something interesting. So I don't want the chair to be facing the wall completely or the desk completely. So I'm picking up a new vanishing point on my horizon line. And that's what I'm going to use to draw the seat of the chair and decide of its orientation. So right now we're just figuring out the footprint. And I'm gonna end up doing a round foot. But you'll see that I'll be going towards a new vanishing point that's on the right of the drawing this time when I build the box and the seat itself, the chair itself. Alright, at this stage I have most of the elements I want in the drawing where I want them. We've got the bed, which is now the shape and size I want. We have that desk in the background with a couple of screens, and we have the chair placed how I want it, right in front of the desk, facing the right hand side. What's left to do now is make it look lived in, so I'm going to put a couple of shelves in left and right, and put quite a lot of simple textures, as well as figure out the shape I'm going to give my window on the right hand side. So on top here I'm just going to put a big shelf with some boxes, books, that sort of stuff. I'll add a kind of a library shelf just on the side of the bed, and the rest will be basic paneling. Yeah, that's about it. Then we just need to figure out as well the shape and size of the window, but that'll be pretty easy in the for the window here, decided not to make it all flat, but give it a bit of an angle so it goes outwards a little bit. And also I didn't like the big empty flat panel that was on the right hand side below it, so I added a shape which will be interpreted as, I don't know, a radiator, I guess, or some air cooling or heating device. Just something to make it look less flat and boring. Alright, time to ink this thing. So, same pen as always, Pilot G Tec C4 0.4, which is my favorite pen in the world. Using reasonably light lines, because I know I'll be going over them a couple of times. It's okay if there's a little mess up here and there, because we can always straighten stuff out later. So right now it's just, yeah, basic lines. We'll do the outlines later with the pen on my right hand side here, a Papermate Flair Medium, which I use all the time, although I should be using a brush pen, but they're extremely hard. So I'm not courageous enough that day. Alright, so basic lines, and then we'll come back to add some paneling, a bit of structure, make it visually a bit more appealing, and then we'll get to the color. So let's go through this part quickly and come back once we get the color out. Alright, here we're starting to think about light. I've talked about before about single light sources and how they're pretty dramatic and a reasonably easy way to make a design pop. Here I'm imagining some light coming through the window, hitting the floor and part of the bed. Having that light wrap around objects is also a good design cue. There are clever ways to do this that are not complicated and are accurate, and I am not good with them, so I'm eyeballing it here again, which I think I get away with it in the end. You'll let me know. But there are great tutorials left and right about how to do this the proper way. So remember that everything you see in this channel is not gospel, and that there are many better ways and faster ways to do what I do, and there are great people out there teaching it, so bear that in mind. So here we go, thick windows. We'll do the same for the bottom one. I've penciled out where the light will fall, and I'll probably tweak it a couple of times still before committing. So let's do some texture, some paneling, and come back in a moment. Okay, time to put some outlines on this. So again, I'm going to use this pen for two things. First, the outlines, where I'm just going to use it to illustrate when there's a space behind something. So like you see the top and the left of the pillow here, the top of the shelf. We'll go around the chair, the windows, all these places, under the desk here. Just make those lines bold and strong. Make the image much more visually pleasing. And I'll also use it to mark the recesses of the panels in the walls. We'll talk about that when we get to it. This is a really nice pen for this sort of work. I think it's super cheap, it's super consistent, and really easy to use. Like I said before, I should really be doing this with a brush pen and have more variation in my line weight, but My experience with brush pens is that they're amazing, but the learning curve is a steep one. So I do practice with it, but most of my practice right now isn't exactly up to par. So I fall back on this one a lot because it's really in my comfort zone. When it comes to chairs like this one, I think I might do a little video on my Patreon shortly, explaining how you can design this kind of round organic shapes out of a box. I think it might be an interesting topic. If there's anything you'd like me to talk to about, you know, at any point, talk about, sorry, let me know. Drop a line in the comments, and if I can, I'll be happy to do something about it. You can also come in and see me live on Twitch. I'm there 3-4 mornings a week, and I'm happy to have a chat with you. I'll put all the details in the comments, as well as the gear I'm using, and as well as a link to my Patreon that I hope to revive, because I've had it for a while, but I've never really used it or promoted it. But I think it could be a cool place for building a little community. So here we go. This is what I meant by making the panels look a little recessed. Just go over with a heavier line when there's a part you would see from the angle at which you're standing. Like here you would see the top of this and the right. And you see it instantly makes the middle part of that panel look recessed compared to the frame. Super easy, super fast, reasonably efficient. We can reinforce that later with a drop shadow. But already like this, it yields results quickly. Okay, here we're thinking about light again and where it would fall on the bed and on the floor, as well as the chair, or part of it anyway. Trying to keep it simple, not super accurate, but I want to make sure it's not wrong enough so that it instantly looks wrong, incorrect, unpleasant. The whole game here is to do something that looks like it could be possible. And so, you know, time-wise here, we're about halfway through my drawing. I spent a bit over 2 hours on this one, and we are at 1 hour 5 minutes. And this is the stage where I'm going to start thinking about color. I'm going to try quite a few things to eventually end up on a color I really like. And we're going to do a base color out of it, which is it's a really warm tone, really bright tone. And I'll go over it with some bluish cool grays that I think work really well for this sort of combination of warm and cold. The reason I'll do a whole layer at first of the original color, that bright one, is because then there's still some of it in the gray that I put over afterwards. I don't know if that makes sense the way I'm saying it, but bottom line, it makes the image homogeneous. It doesn't look like it's two different colors out of there. It looks like it's one room, one color with different lighting. So like I said, this is a way I like to proceed a lot to make an image look homogeneous. I start with a base color, and I'll work with a very limited palette in the end. I'll use 2, maybe 3 different cool grays for the rest of the image, but this will be what gives its general tone. So let's hurry up through this and talk about the shading later. Here I'm making sure not to color over the windows, because unlike the rest of the image, they won't be made of the same material. Outside is just the sky or a city or whatever I decide to draw, while everything inside is made of the same stuff, hence will be covered in this particular color. Okay, getting out the cool grays. I'm going to start by the darkest bit of the picture and with a marker that's not crazy dark, so I can always darken it later if I want. Now here I hope you can see what I meant earlier behind the reason for doing this whole layer of the lighter orangish marker. If you look at the seating here, it's definitely a cool bluish gray, but you can still see a hint of that original warm color in it. And that's why I do this entire coat at first before going with the darker tones on anything like shading, because it keeps some of that tone and make it how to explain, it doesn't make it look like it was two clashing colors, just things made out of different stuff. It does look like shadow over one single material. That was a hard sentence to get out. I might delete this. I'm trying to keep the whole runtime not too long. The previous one was 25 minutes, and I wonder if that wasn't a bit much. I'm still stoked so many of you joined to watch it and subscribe to the channel. It really helps. So don't hesitate, give it a like, give a subscribe, click that little bell thing, and as much as I can I'll keep producing these at least once a week. I'm dreaming of doing 2, but I'm not quite sure I'll have the time for that. But once a week I think is a reasonable expectation. Alright, here I'm still struggling with light, but we're gonna get there eventually. Let's speed things up a bit again and see what happens. Putting a little texture now. This is something I use a lot. Just, you know, a bunch of close, thin, light lines, and all of a sudden, instead of a boring, completely flat surface, you have something, and often something is all it takes for the brain to register as texture. So this is something I use a lot, especially in sketches, and I think it works in sci-fi. It's not out of place, so you will see me use a lot of these. They're also a good way to practice some form of hatching in the end. Do some parallel lines without worrying too much about how parallel. This is filler, if you will. Alright, so there's definitely a lot of time lapse in this one. But here, yeah, I'm going back to the color. And just putting the darkest tones first. I know for a fact that I'll actually come back with a darker marker afterwards, but like I said, I think it's always best to work gingerly and start with lighter tones, see if they work, and then if you need, come back with darker ones, because you can never ever go the other way around. So yeah, covering up the places that are going to be the darkest. I know that also I will avoid doing cast shadows on this one, mostly because I hate doing them, because I think they're so hard. And I'll only use a tiny one under the bed in the very end. Thing to remember is that when you do cast shadows, always use the darkest tone you have. It needs to be darker than any other kind of shade you have around. But yeah, now just filling this up, what's not directly in the light, and try to do some kind of gradient later on from the ceiling to the bottom of the walls. So let's fill those up and talk again in a second. So as you can see now, I've used the darker tone I mentioned earlier for the ceiling and darker parts of the image. I was on a cool gray 4 and I've used a 6 here, and now I'm using the 4 again to do some layers to darken the top of the image, and then do a bit of a fade towards the lower parts. The 6 is the lowest, darkest tone I'll use, except for the tiny cast shadow I'll do later. And then the rest will be layers of 4. And I think, from what I see on the picture, that I'll use a 2 for the floor and the lighter parts of the image. Alright, here you can see how we're going darker and darker. I'm trying to use layers for that little gradient on the walls. I'm not trying to make the colors super neat. I think it's alright if it's a little messy, muddy like it is on the top left here. Because this is a room where people have lived. Nothing here is new, nothing here is pristine. So I think it's alright if it looks a little weathered without you know, going overboard. So I'm trying just to keep in mind where the light source is, having a rough idea of how much light would bounce off the floor, stuff like that, but without going really crazy. At this point here I've been drawing for about an hour and a half, so this is also the point where I might just make a few silly mistakes, but I don't think I'll do anything drastic on this one. I think it'll be alright. But here we go, filling up those colors. I'm saving the floor for last because I'll have to decide exactly where I want my light from the window to come in before I commit to that. But now we're very near that point, so I'm going to go over again with a pencil over the edge of that projected light from the window, and then I will fill the floor. I think also on the floor you'll see, I think it's alright to keep some texture, so I'll go just one pass. Yeah, and then it'll be time to do a bit of detail. Tiny little shadows here and there. And probably go over some of the lines, because there's quite a few layers of marker now on the ink, and it's be a good idea to make them stand out again. So often when I've done color like this, especially when it's you know, quite a few layers, yeah, going back with a palette pen and reduce some of the line work is a good idea. Okay, here we go. So I already traced them in pencil, I forgot. Now I'm drawing the edge of what will be in the light. I'm trying to be pretty loose. I'm trying not to be too worried, honestly. I always find it stressful, and you know, once you commit, you just got to get in there. So I know this will be in the shade. It's on the cover, so it's not a straight line. It has little bumps. It doesn't cover the whole of the pillow. This is in the dark. This is always the stressful part for me when it comes to shadows and lighting. It's easy to mess up, and it's just not the thing I'm the most comfortable with, so it's something I work on a lot. I try to include an element of lighting in all of my pictures. It's hit and miss, but hopefully it hits more than it misses. Again, this is all eyeballed. I'm being, you know, it's a lot of guesswork. Just trying to find what kind of works. And I always try to give myself some breathing room in case something doesn't work, so that I have a way to get out of the mistake, find a way to, like I always say, either fix it or distract from it. I said something wrong earlier. I stay with a cool gray 4 for the floor. Thinking back to it, I might have wanted to use something a bit lighter, but it kind of works. So I'm going to do just one pass, and that makes those streak lines you see here. But on the floor, I think it works really nice most of the time. It gives a bit of a shiny texture to it, and I like that. I'm going to leave the top part of the chair here in the light. and I'm not brave enough to figure out exactly what cast shadow it should project on the floor behind it. So I'm just gonna not do that, and I don't think it's striking when you look at the finished drawing. It doesn't look like, oh, there's something missing. So all the rest here will be in the shade as well, so I can just cover that up. I'm trying to go from my vanishing point. I could also just go across from the other vanishing point, or I could just do diagonals, but most of the time I think that's what I'll do. Just as you see it here. It doesn't have to be perfect, just close enough. And now the image changed a lot. We went from solid color first to some shade to now this almost violent light coming in into an otherwise dark place, and I really like the contrast that brings. Like I said before, now a lot of the line work is covered in marker, so I'll have to go back into that, but I think that this is when the image really changes. Coming back with a 6 now just to do some shadows left and right under the cover. Little things like that, nothing crazy. I'll do under the bed as well, because that's a cast shadow. And I might use it again to do little shadows on the panels. Let's see what we do. I think now, yeah, a bit of line work again. Let's keep through that and come back in a sec. Now this is the darkest tone I'll use here for the absolutely darkest place in the drawing. That's an 8. And there's very few places where I'll be using this. But contrast is key to making a drawing look good. That's something I've learned in theory early on and in practice a bit later. But contrast is absolutely necessary. Don't be afraid to push your darkest tones. You know, sometimes a very light image with very little contrast is pleasing, but the vast majority of the time, if you want something to get to the next level, don't be afraid to push your dark tones. And yeah, this was, as you can see on the screen, this was streamed on Twitch. Again, I've said it a few times, but I'm there probably 3 times a week. But I'm not sure for how much longer. I think I want to switch to doing my lives here on YouTube. Let me know if you think that would be a good idea and if you'd be interested. And I'm also, if it picks up, going to do some exclusive stuff on Patreon. Again, I'll send the links down there. It's brand new, so you know, if you come and join me here, you'll be part of the first ones, and you'll be in my heart forever. Kidding aside, all support really matters, from a single like to a video like this, or just looking at it, to supporting me or buying my artwork. This is what gets me by, so thank you all for that. Let's get back in there, put some shadows, some dark tones, and we'll do a bit more line work in a minute. So here we go. You see, redoing those lines makes them pop again. They were kind of lost in the dark ink earlier. I'm going to be doing a few more with the Pilot pen. Putting a little shadow here and left. Were these necessary? I am not sure, but do they look completely out of place? I don't think so. So it's right. This is sketchbook stuff. Again, this is also full of experiments. Stuff I try to do without stress or pressure. So it's a good place to try things out. Alright, never mind, I'm going out of frame here. Still adding texture the same on what is now, as I said, maybe a radiator or some kind of a aircon device. It started as just a shape that I needed here to break that long flat surface. And I think it works alright where it is. Just doing a little shadow here and there on those panels, that also helps everything pop out. Makes a little more depth. Breaks up the murkiness of all the layers of marker. This is close to the end of the drawing. I've been at this for an hour 54 minutes, give or take. So I got about 10 minutes left. Just to add a few touches. At this point, everything is pretty much complete. I still need to do something outside, and I went with a basic choice. I just went with some light blues and with a small gradient from dark to clear from the bottom to the top. Could have gone with something warmer, but I think it fits the image. Here I'm just redoing some of the little details that have been lost in the marker. And I need to apologize for the jumpiness in the camera's focus. I got what I thought would be an upgrade, and I'm really struggling with it. Hopefully I can find settings that work soon, otherwise I'll sell more of my soul to find a replacement camera. There we go, just a little part of the door's mechanism for when it closes. Little shadow in there. And then we'll do a pass for the extreme left of the picture, which is the part of the door that is not in the sunlight. I'm gonna add my best friends, cut lines and paneling. When you do sci-fi, they are your best friends. Do some cut lines and it instantly gives your drawing a more complete feel, and yeah, they just make things better. So if you do sci-fi, if you do mechanical stuff, cut lines are your best friends. Same here for the floor, just doing something a little asymmetrical. So you don't have this one big flat featureless surface, but instead you have 4 or 5 panels. There we go for the windows. Some pale blue. I'll just try to make the bottom a bit darker than the top, so there's a hint of a gradient. Just make it a little more interesting. Again, I could have gone with something a bit more dramatic, like a warm color, an orange, a red, a yellow, but I think this isn't a brutal image, and I didn't want anything striking in it, so that pale blue did the job just fine, I think. Just doing some layers. More layers at the bottom means it'll be darker at the bottom than the top. It's that simple. Keep your ink wet and it works beautifully. Time for a few highlights and a new pen I've been using. What is it? It's a Faber-Castell Pitt Artist Pen Bullet Nib White 101. It's nice. It's way less opaque than the Posca pen I normally use. So it's actually quite more subtle. I still use the Posca pen when I want something really, really shiny. But these, I'm growing accustomed to them, and I think they're working pretty nice. Still learning my way with them, but they're growing on me. I've also got in the mail a white colored pencil. That should be an interesting thing to play around with. So here, yeah, I use the highlights to put the accents on cut lines, on stuff like that, on panels. It just helps define stuff, and it adds to the general contrast of the image as well, even if it's in a very, very subtle manner. And again, contrast is so important. For the next video, I'll be posting something not very dissimilar from this, but on which I struggled a lot more. I was having a bit of a hard day, I guess, creatively speaking. So the process was, a lot messier and a lot more difficult for me. The drawing was really well received on my socials, especially Reddit, which I didn't expect. But yeah, I think it'll be interesting to talk and see the difference between this one, which was no stress, easy design, nothing complicated, with the other one, which wasn't complicated either, but was just a lot harder for me to get out. I'm gonna try to have that one done at some point next week. It'll take a little bit of time before I get a really regular posting schedule, but we're gonna get there. There we go. That's pretty much it. Bit over 2 hours in the making. Yeah, simple layout. Nothing crazy complicated in this one, but it was a good 2 hours of practice. I'll end up just putting a little touch here and there because I can never help myself with that. I often come back to my sketchbook a few days after and go like, oh, let's put a little thing in there. But anyway, if you're still there, thank you so much for joining me on this one. Again, I hope to post regularly, make more of these. I've just started my Patreon and I will link it in the description here. If you have any questions, drawing related or whatever, hit me up in the comments. Don't be afraid. And do give a like and a subscribe if you've enjoyed any part of this. It really means the world for me. Guys, girls, thank you. Have a great one.